always.
For decades, ending child marriage has remained one of Uganda's protection priorities. The country has strengthened its laws, it has adopted national strategies, and brought together government, civil society, and it has brought together development partners around a common goal, ensuring that no child enters marriage before adulthood. Yet, the conversation hasn't ended, because passing laws and changing lives are not always the same thing. So where is the gap? Is it enforcement, poverty, social norms, or are we asking institutions to solve a problem that ultimately begins much closer to home? I'm Victoria Subatani, and this is Impact Uganda. Mr. Goloba, thank you so much for joining us on Impact Uganda. Now, the conversation we're having today, I find that it's quite an important one when we're talking about child marriage. It is something that we know about, something we see happening, but we talk about it, but for a short time, and then we leave it alone. Let's start off and talk from the Ministry of Gender's point of view, and maybe share with us, we know that there are laws that are in place to protect children. How far are those laws going in terms of protecting the children right now from child marriage? And would you say they are working in terms of implementation?
Yeah, thank you, Sibia. First, child marriage is a phenomenon that tries to explain a union between an adult and a minor. It's not catered for or described under the marriage laws of Uganda, but it's a term that is used by social development specialists and programmers to be able to explain that kind of union, which definitely borders what the law describes as defilement. Mm-hmm. So there are several laws in Uganda that are in place. We have the Children Act, we have the Penal Code Act, we have the Domestic Violence Act. All these make provisions for outlawing this kind of union or this kind of sexual relationship between an adult and a minor. And the minor can be both a boy and a girl, because over the past we've also seen incidences where boys are in these unions with adult females. The laws are working because we are seeing a lot of convictions, we are seeing a lot of arrests of these culprits or perpetrators. But to the big extent, the law also depends on the civic consciousness of the community, because cases that relate to marriages of children are existing in communities. The communities don't report, then our system, the police and the judicial system cannot be able to pick those cases and adjudicate on them.
Elizabeth, it's always a good thing to have FIDA's perspective on some of the issues that we get to talk about here on Impact Uganda. And today we're tackling child marriage. And of course, teenage pregnancy is included in that somewhere. Uganda has some laws in place to protect children. But in your work, where do you see the gaps in the implementation of the protection of our children, especially when it comes to child marriage and teenage pregnancies?
It's always a very nice ride here to come back, Sylvia, so do not hesitate to always reach out to FIDA. And I think this is very important for us because the people we serve, I'm sure, watch this Impact show. So thank you to just always, providing that awareness to the public. So yeah, rightfully so, the government of Uganda has been very deliberate about legislation, mostly, right? Our constitution is very clear. Our penal code is very clear about anyone below the age of 18 cannot procure a marriage, cannot consent to sex. The age is 18, right? And it doesn't matter the circumstances. And the Children's Act is very clear, and the regulations to that is very clear about, what the government envisions should guide citizens on what to do. However, we do continue to see weak enforcement, especially enforcement. And enforcement in the sense that we continue to see institutions like the Child Family Protection Unit, which is mandated to, to cover such cases, continuously working below their budget, right? A lot of things can come from that. we continue to see that that leads, or at least we believe, it's one of the factors that lead to police asking for bribes sometimes. It's very common in our communities, and I'm not saying all police stations get to do this, but we have seen it over the news severally, that police will ask for fuel to go and arrest the perpetrator. You know, this is a child, probably 6, who is being defiled, and they've made it to the police to report, but they need fuel to go and arrest this man. And the fuel is not there. Do you know just how demoralizing that is? Then there is this additional cost that I do hope the government begins to pay more attention to. Usually, people pay between 25 to 30,000 Uganda shillings to have the police form 3 form filled. The police form 3 form is that form at the police, if you be there, that has a shape of a person's body. So it's used, someone goes to the police when they do report for sexual assault and other physical violence matters. You take it to a health practitioner who does fail to give evidence to this abuse that you have suffered. It's primary evidence in sexual offenses of these matters. Sorry, some of the children that they suffer. But you find that many families cannot afford this money.
We can't talk about child marriage without addressing the part of poverty. We have to address, like you were saying, teenage pregnancy. But then again, the causes of those things, these are just symptoms, I guess, that we're dealing with, and the numbers are quite high. At the core, what is it that we're actually supposed to solve so that people can, yes, of course, community can gather and come together and protect children. But how do we solve the real issues that people are dealing with?
So we identified that the root causes are basically household poverty, entrenched harmful cultural, social, and religious norms, and just community reluctance. So there are 2 or 3 things that government is doing greatly. Is improving livelihoods for families through all the programs that government is implementing, both cash support programs, parenting programs, but also programs that build the urgency of the girls individually to be able to resist temptations, to be able to resist enticements from adults through life skills and health education, which is now being provided for both in school and out of school, girls and boys.
Finally, if somebody's watching you right now and they just are seeking that kind of help, they don't, like you just said, they're demoralized from going to the police or demoralized for whatever reason. Who else can they call? Who else can they call and they can trust and walk with through their journey, perhaps of healing or even just being rescued out of a dire situation?
I think there's need. Police has done so much, Sibia, we can't take that away, and there's been so much response. And I'd like to encourage the public to trust the police to do their job. I need for more and more people to report. The police crimes report is great and it shows us the numbers, but also the number of cases of child marriages and defilement that end up in clan meetings, in family meetings where a 16-year-old is being exchanged for something X, are also many. So I think we need to trust the police because there's no civil society that has as much coverage as the police. Besides, it's their mandate. It's the government's core mandate through the police. So we need to report to the police. The Ministry of Gender also has a mandate it plays, and they do have the Sauti number 116 that has been doing very good with having many students, many pupils, many kids not even in school being able to report. So that's also another way to utilize. But also NGOs like FIDA, Uganda Law Society, Justice Centers, are institutions that are complementing the role of the government and filling certain gaps. And therefore, I think it's also important for communities to go out there and know, for institutions like ourselves, our services are free at FIDA. We have a toll-free number. We have a social media that you can reach in case you have, you're digitalized.
And finally, what message would you like to send perhaps to parents and communities out there and on how to protect children and how to make sure that they become, the protectors of the community?
My biggest message I want to send to the parents and communities is that let children enjoy their childhood. Child marriage brings on board a lot of burdens to children which deter them from attaining their dreams. Takes them out of school, exposes them to risks of STDs and HIV, and brings a deeper burden to the children and their parents. So as parents, they must do everything to ensure that they identify risks to these and report if advances are being made by leaders, both cultural and religious, and individuals in communities, to the relevant authorities.
Child marriage is more than a legal issue. It's a conversation about the future of Uganda's children. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Visits commence by 11th to 25th of August. For support, contact support.kip@unoc.com today. Invest in KIP. Invest in Uganda. Kabalega Petro Best Industrial Park, a project by the Ugandan National Oil Company, UNOC.
Welcome back. You're watching Impact Uganda, and today we're discussing child marriage in Uganda and what it will take to ensure every child has the opportunity to grow up safe, stay in school, and choose their own future.
In Uganda, 1/3 of girls are married before the age of 18. That's 33%. And 1 in 4 girls, 24%, have a baby before they turn 18. So it's a really big proportion of the female population. And that is a tragedy for the individual girl because especially with childbearing comes school dropout. Sometimes girls even get kicked out of their families. It prevents them from participating in a real way in the money economy, which means they also lose future earnings. They lose the opportunity to have careers and aspirations in life. It really kind of ends their life, certainly their professional lives, at a very young age. And it's not just a tragedy for the girl, it's also a tragedy for the country. Because what's interesting about Uganda at the moment is from a demographic point of view, which is what we focus on in UNFPA, we look at population growth, how many people are being born, how long do they live, etc. And Uganda is one of the most interesting places in the world, I think, right now in terms of its demographic profile, because it has such a big youth population. And what that big youth population means is that there is this enormous potential for Uganda to achieve very rapid economic growth. That's what happened in countries like Singapore and South Korea and Thailand when they jumped to upper middle income status very quickly. So this whole agenda that the Ugandan government has of tenfold growth and becoming an upper middle income country, that's really possible thanks to this youth population. But it's not automatic. It only happens if you really invest in young people. You need that young population to be healthy, you need them to be educated, and you need them to have jobs. And so I'm saying all of this because when you look at teenage pregnancy and child marriage and how it affects 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 girls, we are losing a quarter of the female workforce actually every year. So it's not just a big challenge for the individual girl who's vulnerable. We know that girls who are poor are more likely to get married young and are more likely to have children young. And we also know that girls in rural areas are more likely to be married and have children early. And there's a lot of regional variations. There's a lot of different dynamics in different parts of Uganda. So in some parts of the country, you have nearly 30%, whereas in others you have more closer to 14 or 15%. But on average, it's about 24% of girls that are getting pregnant before the age of 18. I think in some parts of the country and in some parts of the country, it's more common that girls are married off at a young age and then pregnancy follows because it's expected that they would get pregnant once they're married. In other parts of the country, the tradition or the social norm is not so much to have early marriage. It's more that girls are getting pregnant for other reasons, and as a result of their pregnancy, they then drop out of school, and then they get married perhaps as a result of the pregnancy. So one is sometimes a result of the other, or sometimes it's the other way around, and that depends on just social dynamics in the place where they're from. They're not separate issues, though. They're two sides of the same coin. In both cases, whether it's about child marriage or early child rearing, it really ends a lot of opportunities for that girl. It's typical that she would drop out of school. It's typical that she would now not earn a living in a sort of participation in the money economy. And it's likely that a lot of her future prospects end at that point. There's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blame towards those girls. There's a lot of you got yourself in trouble kind of reactions. And I think that what we really need to understand is that these are children we're talking about. These are adolescent girls. And when they get pregnant, it's not their failure. It's not the failure of the child. It's the failure of the society that failed to protect her from this fate. So what we have to look at when we look at the interventions is how do we as the adults and the institutions and the communities and the society, how do we hold ourselves accountable for how we need to protect children and adolescents? And that's where we should start from when we look at what works. Because it is true that when we look at the rate of child marriage, it's been 33% for a really long time. We haven't made enough progress. And part of the reason for that is that social norms are hard to change. It does take a while. You cannot expect that it's quick. It often takes a generation or sometimes more. But even so, I think that we cannot have interventions only that put the responsibility and the blame for child marriage onto the children and adolescents. These are children having children. So we as adults need to take responsibility. What does that mean in terms of what we should do and what we think works? The first thing that we do a lot at UNFPA, which helps us, is to study the data. We look a lot at what are the trends, what are the numbers that we see, who are these girls, why are they getting married, what happens to them afterwards, what are the characteristics, and so based on that we can shape our interventions. Secondly, we work a lot on services. We work to make sure that they have adequate health services. That it might include family planning, but it also includes, for example, safe maternal health services, because girls who are already pregnant need to be able to give birth safely, especially because their bodies are very young, and so it's dangerous for them to give birth. So we really need to make sure that they have assistance when they give birth. It also includes education. Are we educating them properly to understand the risks involved in having sex at a young age? Do they have that knowledge? And the services also include social protection services. And so we really need to focus on making sure that all of those services are available. Thirdly, we need to work on the social norms. And this is the part that can often be challenging to do, and it takes time. But Uganda has a lot of success stories when it comes to the social sector, and the work that has been done has yielded really effective results. So one thing that's really important to note and to celebrate, I think, is that it is so much safer to be a woman giving birth in Uganda today than it was even 10 years ago. It's 44% safer. And that's because we've invested a lot. The government has invested a lot, and there's been political will to try to make it safer for women to give birth. That includes, of course, because there's a lot of teenage pregnancy, that includes improving the situation for a lot of teenage girls. We've also had a lot of successes on school enrollment. School enrollment is a success story in Uganda. What we do see is a lot of girls drop out before they reach secondary school, so we still need to work on that. Uganda is in this extremely interesting demographic moment right now. We call it a demographic window of opportunity. And this is a moment where if we invest properly in the health and the education of young people and the job opportunities for young people, it can have a huge multiplier effect. So this is true in general for young people, but investing in those areas will also help us.
Uganda's commitment to ending child marriage is no longer defined by just whether the right laws exist. Much of that work has already been done. The greater test is whether those protections are reaching the children they were designed to serve. Because every child who remains in school, every family that chooses protection over pressure, and every community that rejects child marriage brings the country one step closer to fulfilling that promise. I'm Victoria Sibatani, and thank you for watching Impact Uganda.